Hey guys, happy Coronacation. Hopefully, you guys are staying healthy and safe during this crazy pandemic we have going on. Of course, we'll talk about that later on when we get into that topic of genetics. We'll go over diseases and so on. But anyway, I want to go over your 6.3 notes that you were supposed to turn in today. When you get a chance, I want you to double check and make sure that all of your section 1, 2, and 3 have everything in it that it is supposed to. We've already taken our quiz on section 1. We did a group quiz on section 2. We're going to go over 6.3 and then we're going to take an open notes quiz as long as we're out of school. And then we'll figure out where we're going to go after that. More than likely, we'll do 6.4 as an open notes quiz as well, as long as we're out of school. I'll give you plenty of practice on that. But to zoom through really quick, section 1, again, you guys already have these notes. These notes were all about the intro to meiosis. We were doing a comparison between meiosis and mitosis. We also went over the karyotypes and what our chromosomes look like when they're aligned. We went over the difference in autosomes and sex chromosomes, diploid and haploid, and so on. Going into section 2, again, remember we had our group quizzes. Those of you that did not do your group quiz, I will give you an assignment tomorrow. And that assignment will actually be set for Monday. I'm pretty sure I have it set for Monday for you guys to do. So anybody that was absent, if you have a blank in Power School for the 6.2 group quiz, I'll give you an assignment to do as an alternative. But again, we were able to create this section for meiosis, the 8 different stages, prophase 1 through telophase 1, and then prophase 2 through telophase 2, all 8 steps. What we're going over now is Gregor Mendel. So some of you have gone through these notes. I started going through these notes with, and the rest of you, we did not get a chance because, again, our timing. But if you want to snap a screenshot of this just for you to have, you can do so. I will also, again, post the notes like I always do for you guys to have. I just want to make sure that you can hear the explanation and understand it coming from me. So first of all, we have Mr. Gregor Mendel here, who's also known as the father of genetics. He is the guy that basically figured out that we are able to pass down traits of what we carry, whether they are dominant or recessive. First thing he talked about was how we have a control over breeding, looking at the observation of either or traits. So basically, we're having traits in 2 forms. We'll talk about those 2 forms in a second, known as the alleles. And then he actually did his experiments using purebred plants. And again, we're going to look at this experiment over here, in which he actually crossbred or mated those organisms themselves using purebred pea plants. Going back up to the top, he used pea plants because of their specific characteristics. So pea plants, we're looking at the shape of the pea, the color of the pea, the color of the flower, the pod shape in which the peas are housed, the pod color, again, in which the peas are housed, the flower position on the actual plant itself, and the plant height. So when we get into our monohybrid and dihybrid crosses, we'll look at those characteristics and we'll give them specific letter alleles and so on. Moving on, what Mendel actually did is he did what's called a cross. A cross is basically the mating of those 2 organisms. So he's taking those sexual reproductive organs and making those plants have babies. So he took the male part, which is also known as the stamen. That's in here. Those are the parts that house the pollen, good old plant sperm. Welcome to biology in Miss Swann's class. And then he painted them onto the female portion, which is also known as a pistil. In order for him to do that, he's going to do that inside of a lab, make sure it's in a controlled environment. And then again, we have here what he's actually crossing is, let me get my highlighter so you can see what I'm talking about. This section here is what I'm reading. So Mendel mated or crossed the purebred pea plants with purple flowers. And again, he's going to breed 2 sets of purebred purple flowered plants. Over here, we've got some vocab words. We've got a P generation. The P generation is basically the original parent. So in this case, we would think of these as being your maternal or paternal grandparents. So your 4 grandparents would be the parental generation. We're only going to use that example because when we get to a monohybrid or a Punnett square, it's going to make more sense. So the parents, and actually let's look at them as our parents. That'll be maybe a little bit easier for you. So our parents would be the parental generation. And again, you can look at it as your parents or your grandparents. We're just going to go generations down. If I look at these as your parents, I'm going to give you kids in the future. If we use them as your grandparents, then we can use you as the future generation. So anyway, getting back to the parental generation, Mendel's going to use those purebred plants as the parents. Again, he's going to cross purebred purple flowers with purebred white flowers. So he's using purebred pea plants. Once he does that cross, he's going to come up with the first generation, which are the kids of the parents. Either being you, if we're using your parents as the parental generation, or being your parents, if we're using the grandparents as the parental generation. So again, your parents, first generation would be you. That's the offspring that comes from the parents. In this case, we're using the pea plants. He ended up with all purple flowers. So what he did is he's going to allow them to self-pollinate. Once we do that, we're going to end up with this here, which is an appearance of a white flower. So you have 2 purple parents having the possibility of a white. Why? Because the original pops up here. And again, I give you the example of using your grandparents because a lot of you don't get your traits from your parents, you get them from your grandparents. So that's why I used your grandparents as the parental generation, your parents as the F1, and you as the F2. If we're looking at it the other way, again, your parents could be the parental generation. This would be you with your traits. And then your future generation would be your kids. There are going to be possibilities that your kids have your biological mom and biological dad traits. Again, based on this observation from Mendel and the pea plants. So when we do that, what we're going to do, again, we're going to allow the first generation to self-pollinate. I wrote that here. And then we're going to look at their offspring. That offspring, again, is the second generation. That is the result of the self-pollination of the F1. The F1, Mendel is going to find that there are 3/4 purple and 1/4 white. Again, that's where this picture comes into handy. There are 3 out of the 4 purple and 1 out of the 4 that are white. This is going to be our basic Punnett square that we're going to look at in the next section. Last few things, looking at the results, he's looking at all 7 traits. Those 7 traits coming from this box up here with the characteristics. So looking at all 7 traits, he's going to find that approximately 3/4 of the F2 had 1 trait and 1/4 had the other. The 1 trait we're looking at is the color because that was what was generated in the first picture that we looked at. And then again, we can look at this box here. This box here is going to give us all of the possibilities of how many peas or how many plants had those characteristics. This information is only useful when we're talking about Mendel's experiment. We're not going to use this data in anything that we do, we're going to use our own data. But again, this is the original data, which showed him ratios and how those possibilities of dominant and recessive traits work. You're going to notice this word here, monohybrid. Monohybrid meaning one cross. And then you're going to notice dominant and recessive. Dominant traits are the ones that are going to be expressed, and the recessive traits are going to be the ones that are hidden, that will show up later the more you cross. In conclusion, traits are inherited as discrete, unique genes or discrete units. Again, those unique genes are very, very, very particular to whatever we're talking about being dominant or recessive. And we'll talk about that later. So again, those discrete, unique units are known as genes. Genes are also the segments on the chromosomes that we talked about before in the karyotypes and on our individual chromatid or chromatin chromosomes. Last thing we're talking about is the law of segregation. Segregation basically means to separate. So this means we are going to inherit 2 copies of each gene, one from mom and one from dad, but we're only going to donate 1 copy in our gametes. So mom picks the dominant genes or the recessive genes, and dad picks the dominant or recessive genes. It's called natural selection. That's how it's chosen to figure out who is going to express what. Again, this is what causes things like color blindness in males or male baldness that comes from mom. Just those little characteristics. That is it for this section. I've gone over the entire section 3, just a verbal. What you're going to see from me later, and I'm just going to show it to you really quick because some of you might want to get that screenshot and take it and run with it. But I'm going to give you that later. We're going to do 6-4. 6-4 is all about the monohybrid cross. So if you want to go ahead and get a heads up on that, I will allow you to get that done for extra credit. Some of you have already gotten it done. If you need me for anything, of course, Google Meet is available. Just go to the bulletins and click on my link. I'll be there between 11:45 and 2:45 unless you email me and let me know to pop on. I can do that really quick. But until then, you guys enjoy, again, your coronication. I know we are spending a lot of time getting schoolwork done. That is great and wonderful. That way we don't have to make up any lost time. Again, have fun, stay safe, stay healthy, and I will talk to you later. Adios.